We're continuing to follow the really wild developments this morning that brought air travel to a standstill today. An outage of an FAA system is causing still big flight disruptions across the United States. Thousands of flights have been delayed or canceled because of it. The FAA did lift the ground stop and flights are resuming, which is great news. But this also now in its place, there are big questions about what this really means about commercial travel and what happened here. Joining me right now is Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg. Secretary, thanks for coming in. I really appreciate your time in the middle of all this. What is your understanding about what happened today?
So here's what we know. This was a safety system that produces what are called NOTAMs, or notices to air missions. This is different from the other part of the FAA's operation, the air traffic control system. So this is not the system that lets aircraft know where other aircraft are. But what it is a standardized, uniform way for getting important safety messages out to airports, aircraft, and airlines. For example, if a runway is closed, or if there's a military or space operation coming up in a certain sector, or maybe a navigation beacon is out, something that a pilot would need to know for safety reasons. Very important, of course, for that information to be flowing efficiently. Somewhere overnight, there was an issue with irregularities in the messages that were going out that reflected a bigger systems issue. And this morning, as of about 7 o'clock, there were still problems validating that the messages were going out. So for safety reasons, to make sure that every aircraft that took off was doing so safely, FAA implemented a ground stop lasting about an hour and a half, from about 7:30 to 9, to make absolutely sure that the messages were moving correctly and that the information for safety purposes is working the way it should. That has happened. That's the good news. Flights are operating, though we are going to see the ripple effects from that this morning's delays working through the system during the day. Now we have to understand how this could have happened in the first place, why the usual redundancies that would stop it from being that disruptive did not stop it from being disrupted this time, and what the original source of the errors or the corrupted files would have been.
Any indication that there was a cyber attack involved?
There's been no direct evidence or indication of that, but we are also not going to rule that out until we have a clearer and better understanding of what's taking place. But again, no indication of that at this time.
You know, I was looking back after Southwest's meltdown over the holiday with their system. You had said that the airline, in your words, were that they, quote, needed to find a way to really rebuild trust and confidence. When this happens, when something like this happens and it's an FAA system, does the FAA need to do the same?
Well, certainly when there's an issue in the FAA that needs to get looked at, we're going to own it, same as we ask airlines to own their companies and their operations. But the bottom line for us is always going to be safety. It is an extraordinary thing that millions of passengers fly through the air every year, and it is the safest way to travel in the United States. We work very hard to keep it that way, including being extremely conservative anytime there's any question or any irregularity about that. It's an extraordinary record in terms of safety, but we've also got to make sure there are efficient operations. Air passengers have been through a lot, especially in the course of the last year, with the disruptions that we've seen. We've been able to make some major gains in terms of accountability for airlines when it comes to their customer service. We equally have to make sure that FAA has the systems, the staffing, and the operations that it needs to serve air passengers well.
One of the top Democrat in the House Transportation Committee this morning says that what this does is it begs the question about the current state of technology infrastructure of the FAA. Is the system out of date?
Well, the system is continuously being upgraded and improved, but I think that is one of the key questions that that we have to look at based on what we saw overnight. I did speak to the chair and to members of Congress on both sides, and reached out to members in both chambers this morning just with operational updates after I briefed the president. And I welcome the attention from Congress, especially because we're coming up on the period when the FAA reauthorization, the 5-year bill that provides funding and direction for the FAA, is coming before Congress. It is the right time for us to be taking up those questions.
More broadly, if this one issue, and I'm just going to call it a computer glitch, and I know there's going to be a more technical term for what happened, if this one issue can essentially paralyze the entire U.S. domestic flight system, even for an hour and a half, it does beg the question I know people are asking, is how vulnerable is the system? And should people be worried?
Well, what people need to know is that FAA will always act to make sure that passengers are safe. And part of what you saw this morning was an act of caution to be sure until it was 100% airtight that the system was working properly, even just for delivering messages, that we had that ground stop. But I do think that broader question is a real one. What are the redundancies? What are the backups? What are the means to make sure that a disruption like this does not happen? Because what you saw this morning was something we haven't seen in a very long time, and we need to design in a field that's changing a lot and is going to be changing a lot more in the years to come. We need to design a system that does not have those kind of vulnerabilities.
Just really quick, I mean, do you see what happened this morning as just as acceptable? Like, does this, I know you think out of an abundance of caution is kind of what I'm sensing from you, that they had to put the ground stop in place, Secretary. But if this happens again, and it doesn't sound like right now you can guarantee it won't, is this an acceptable way for the FAA to be operating?
Well, it is the right call to act out of an abundance of caution, but no, these kinds of disruptions should not happen. And my primary interest, now that we've gotten through the immediate disruptions of the morning, is understanding exactly how this was possible and exactly what steps are needed to make sure that it doesn't happen again.